Patrick.
Hey, Michael J.
Looks like neither of us are right, man. Teamer Adventures, not the best. Mono Black Beatdown, also not the best.
Well, hold on. I don't know that either of us really thought that Mono Black and Teamer Adventures were the best. We were just really hoping, right? And they both have been okay. Not exactly what you would call the best.
I don't think we've had this clear of a best deck in a while, actually.
So, man, talk to me about Uro.
Well, here's how it is. There was a 1,000+ person tournament over the weekend, and 5 of the top 8 decks, including places 1, 2, 3, and 4, and 5, to be quite clear, were all the same archetype. All of them played Uro, particular type of Titan, and they played it in a 3-color combination with black. So Sultai Ramp looked to be the best deck in, I don't even know what week 1, what week this is.
Yeah, it was also the best deck in week 0. Like before there were like big tournaments. No, yeah. Just in the first week, last week of like online play, it wasn't dominant like this. But it was a clear first place where it was like, 30% of the field. And that's the reason for the addition of black. And, a few people still play red. But the banning of Wilderness Reclamation really, really dampens the value of red because of how much the Wilderness Reclamation Expansion Explosion combo was like the biggest draw. And then white, the biggest draw to white was Teferi Time Raveler.
Which is now
so without Teferi Time Raveler or Wilderness Reclamation, black has risen up. And part of that, it's not so much that any individual black card is that much better than any other black card. And there's actually a great deal of variety sometimes among some of these Sultai ramp decks of which specific spot removal or sweeper or haymaker they might play. But mostly they play black because it has the best removal.
So, just on that point, you have some folks who are playing 4 copies of Casualties of War. The winner of the Red Bull Untapped International Qualifier number 4 played only 2, but I actually do think there is a single best black card that is really bolstering this archetype. And I think that card is Extinction Event. No.
Extinction Event. Oh, really?
Yeah.
Wow, okay.
So if you look at kind of the history of kind of black sweepers and standard, there are 2 things that, it's like since Languish, call it, right? We're not talking about Damnation days. Since the last couple of year or 2, they have 2 things in common with each other. 1, typically double black, and 2, typically very limited in their ability to take out certain type of threats, especially large threats, right? So you got all kinds of cards that cost like BB1, and they can take out things that have 2 toughness, right? And sometimes they remove them from the game. Sometimes they do -2/-2, all different ones. They've got a variety of those, all costing BB1. Then you have a card like Ritual of Soot, which is a super haymaker sometimes and utterly worthless sometimes. But Extinction Event has 2 things going on for it, not the least of which is it's single black, right? So
that's huge, I think.
In these Uro decks, right, clearly we're talking about early game blue and green being, that's what's setting the table. You want to be able to do your Uro thing early. You want to get, your goal is to get to double green on turn 4, right, for Nissa Who Shakes the World, or potentially some kind of sideboard card, depending. But like having a black.
And you still need blue for Teferi too. Teferi Master of Time.
Sure.
Double blue.
So, I mean, even if you look at the structure of these decks, like the winning deck has exactly 2 swamps. That's how many swamps you need to cast the card Casualties of War. It has exactly that many swamps. And it has cards like Cultivate. This version only has 1 Cultivate, but there are others with as many as 4 Cultivates, right? To help you find those swamps. Just getting black on demand, that's a non-zero consideration.
I don't know. I mean, I agree with you that single black, it's real nice to be able to only need that. But I think it's just not going to come up that often early. I mean, maybe it's some, but like we're talking about a deck that has 4 Watery Grave, 4 Overgrown Tomb, 4 Zagoth Triumph, 4 Fabled Passage, and then however many Swamps and Cultivates.
But that still doesn't mean you're going to have double black on turn 3 or 4, right?
Oh, no, I agree.
That's what I'm
I
saying.
agree.
The single black is a big deal because of the time.
I agree. It's helpful. It's very helpful. But I almost don't know. I almost think that there might be even more benefit from the fact that first of all, it's never dead. But second of all, you can dodge whichever of your creatures you have. If you have Hydra Crassus,
the big one.
If you can exile somebody's Uro while keeping your Crassus, or exile somebody's Crassus while keeping your Uro.
Well,
or just sweep the board against all the 2s, or whatever.
I think exile somebody's 2, in particular, Scavenging Ooze, without exposing your Uro, either in the graveyard or the battlefield, because that's an even odd split there, is a big one. But the fact that you remove the opponent's Uro from the game, right? And when you alluded it's never dead. It's not just never dead. You exile their Uro, right? It's like Uro, part of Uro's appeal is its inevitability. This card doesn't just kill an Uro and potentially other odd threats, depending on what matchup you're in. It kills it forever. It kills it dead.
Yep. Yeah, no, I agree with you. I'm on board. I know that some other people were playing more Ritual Soot and Cry of the Carnarium, but I've always liked Extinction Event more, and I think you sold me on it just being a particularly good time for it.
Yeah, I think without a doubt this is there are a lot of reasons to play Sultai versus other 2 or 3 color combinations, but I think Extinction Event's a big one. And then also, it's horrible if you're trying to like grind the ladder. Like last month, you could go deep into Diamond playing mid-range green or something. This deck covers the mid-range green decks on like every angle. It's horrible for them, right? Like
sure. I mean, if you got a mix of Aether Gusts, Eliminates, Heartless Axe, you have all this stuff to bridge, and then it's not like Extinction Event is like a bad thing, a bad thing to be bridging to, and then you get to the Uro part of the game, and it's not like Casualties of War doesn't stack with all this stuff.
Oh no, the mid-range green decks could easily have like a Stonecoil Serpent, a Scavenging Ooze, a Great Henge.
Stonecoil, hold on.
You can't target
There are a lot of artifact creatures that are worried about Casualties of War.
Stonecoil
Serpent, not that high on.
But I was correcting myself by saying you could have a Great Henge, right? But you'll have like a Vivian, a Nissa, a Great Henge. Like all
Great Henge is even more important.
All kinds of different permanents in play. They got their choice of things to shoot at with Casualties of War. Easily 3 for 1, if not 4 for 1, a lot of the time when you're casting that card against mid-range green. I think like this is almost the optimal deck to be playing if mid-range green is one of the top decks to be playing. And plus, it's just better on the ramp side. It's so effective on that front.
And you get to just board in to be even better, right? Like your main deck is already great, but because of other matchups, you have sideboard cards that you wanted anyway that happen to make you even better there. Like, oh, what do you know? We'll just board in 2 Noxious Grasps, another Eliminate, another Aether Gust.
How obnoxious is it that this card, Noxious Grasp, not only kills Questing Beast, a 4-mana investment, but can kill a variety of 4 or 5-mana investment Planeswalkers. Right? There's just no way to sneak up on Sultai with mid-range green. It's Dude, horrible.
Enter the God Eternals.
Yeah.
That kills Questing Beast dead.
It kills it dead, and it kills the next Questing Beast.
Oh, yeah. That matchup seems fantastic for Sultai Ramp.
Yeah, it's really, really bad for I think any mid-range creature deck with a variety of permanents. Like, I don't know. Like, I was just like, kind of brainstorming, and I do think that there is probably a way to get an edge. I think you just got to go bigger than this deck, right? Like, when you cut off the fastest combo deck, which was Wilderness Reclamation, which wasn't necessarily fast to win the game, but was like really fast to get into a position of like
insurmountable.
Yeah, like just a momentum. And like, all right, I haven't actually killed you yet, but the next 3 turns are going to be miserable because you think that you have an open, but you don't really. Like, I'm drawing a ton of extra cards. I'm doing a ton of extra stuff. I've always got an Aether Gust in my back pocket. So that's the fastest deck from that front, and you cut off the most powerful control element, which was Teferi Time Raveler. Of course, a deck that is, and I'm not even sure how you classify this. Is this a mid-range deck? Is this a ramp deck? It's not even that rampy. It's got like
no, it's not really. No, it's just a mid-range deck.
This, of course, is the kind of deck that's going to rise.
Yeah, it's. I mean, and I think if you notice, you know what this deck secretly is? This deck is actually Jund. Like if you look,
I agree.
It's all the way Jund down to the Thought Seizes. It's got 3 Thought Erasure and 2 Agonizing Remorse. Some people play Duress. Some people play 4 Thought Erasure. So, I mean, there's a big variety among which discard spells, but there's like a pretty good amount of 1-for-1 and set up with information to know what you're up against. And then your Hydroid Crassus is Bloodbraid Elf. You straight up just use Scavenging Ooze. And Nissa can do a Garruk impression. I mean, it's a little bit bigger than a lot of Jund decks, but all the Terminates, it's got all the Terminates.
Oh, yeah.
This is just a Jund deck.
Absolutely.
And once in a while,
agree.
you see Jund play a couple Cultivates or something.
Yeah, I mean, they had the Rampant Growth era. I think that this is perfectly described. It's like, make kind of a bigger Jund. Remember, like, there was like Jund
It is a
Rampant
big
Growth.
Jund.
Into Broodmate Dragon. I think it's more that Jund than than kind of the low to the ground Bogart Ram Gang Jund. In any case, I think it's also worth mentioning Teferi Master of Time is so subtly good in this set because it feeds Uro. Right? It's just like Uro fuel while selecting your cards. I mean, like it's kind of dumb how synergistic this deck is.
So it actually what's kind of funny is that in this deck, Teferi, you have to squint a little bit. But Teferi Master of Time does a little bit of a Liliana of the Veil impression. Like Liliana of the Veil, one of the things that made it so good for Jund is that you can discard the like the classic problem with the rock decks or whatever, where they just have wrong answer.
Yeah.
If you have a discard spell that does nothing, you can just discard it to Liliana. Or if you have a spot removal spell against somebody with no creatures, you can discard it to Liliana. Here, the same is true with Teferi. If you're playing as some Joker with just planeswalkers and counterspells or whatever, you can just discard your Heartless Act to your Teferi.
Yeah,
so
absolutely. And I think like Thought Erasure is such a Jundish discard spell also because it's like discard and. Right? Like when you like Thought Erasure someone and you
got
also
a little lightning.
Yeah, you like bury an Uro at the same time. That has got to be so disheartening, right?
Well, I don't know. It wasn't for me. I smiled. I guess I was
when
the one who
did that.
doing
Yeah. I read today there's people who, when they see new cards, they imagine playing them, and there's other people who imagine playing against them. So.
I mean, I do both. I just try to be on the right side of it more often. What do you think about the people who go all the way up to Ugin? Because some of these decks that actually play like, say, 4 Cultivates and 1 or 2 Ugins, they're starting to get a little closer to a ramp territory.
Yeah, so I'm going to semi-blow your mind. I think that the next level, to borrow the Patrick Chapin branding, the next level is 80 cards.
No such thing. Oh, my God.
You got a Yorion. You get all the stuff, all the toys. Just play with 4
No, you don't.
Cultivates.
Yorion, Hydroid Crassus, not that good. Yorion, Uro, not that good.
Yorion, cards that aren't in this deck, for example, Cavalier, very good. Cavalier, Pelucranos, very good. I think when you add 20 cards, you can add even more angles.
Oh my God.
And potential inevitabilities. So you're not a buyer on 80 card Sultai ramp.
No, well, here's the 80 card Sultai ramp I want to see. It's by OG David Besso. Shout out to David Besso. Oh my God, talk about Italy's finest. So David Besso was packing Orzhov, Yorion, just a good mix of everything, like it's got the Burglar Rat, Urex Fenlurker kind of angle. And I love the Doom Foretold, but don't try hard. No, seriously.
There's no real Doom Foretold angle here, right? Like if you get...
Yeah, there is. A Treacherous Blessing.
You get a bonus on Treacherous Blessing.
And Elspeth. Only a little.
It's very not try hard, right? If you
it's not try hard at all.
And you sacrifice it to Doom Foretold later, you're like, it was fine. Like, you're just, at that point, you're just even Steven, right? Like, the Burglarette annoyed them. They're like, I guess I don't have to spend a card on that anymore, so everybody wins.
Yeah. I think this is a nice, clean list. The only thing is I always, when I see 80 cards with 3 Elspeth Conquers Death, I do kind of like do a double take.
Your eyes.
But then when
yeah.
But when I check and see, oh, that's because he wanted to have room for 3 more Yorions, all is forgiven.
Yeah.
Like
I think I could find it. I think I could find another cut. Like, can we not play with three
maybe
burglar
it's
rats?
Possible. It's
one
possible.
Elspeth Sun's nemesis.
Maybe but my point is that most people don't get to the spot of playing the 3+1 Yorions either. And I think that once you're actually doing that, I have to respect the possibility that you've considered what kind of a curve you want. 80 cards isn't all the cards in the world. 6 5-drops out of 80 is still a lot. That's more than 4 or 5 drops in a 60. So I
think we'll agree this is a beautiful natural Yorion deck, right? Like, all the creatures are 187 creatures. You've got 187 enchantments, like Oath of Kaya and Elspeth Conquers Death. And not for nothing, you Glass Casket Bell, and then you blink it with Yorion, you get Beast 2. That's so all in the family.
Oh, yeah. So what do you think, man? Does this have what it takes to compete with Sultai?
Yeah, sure. I mean, I don't
think so.
The main thing I don't like about it is all the Kaya's Wraths in the sideboard.
I don't know, though. Is Kaya's Wrath good against Sultai Ramp?
No, it's terrible against Sultai Ramp, but it's good against everybody else.
Yeah, but I don't think you need it. I think part of the problem is I like this deck, except I don't think you can really beat Sultai Ramp that much.
So you think it's Sultai Ramp v Field?
Well, if so far out of the Yorion and Sultai.
I mean, 5 slots out of the top 8, including 4 in the top 4, that's a flag in the ground.
So we did see a Teamer Adventure deck crack the was it top 8, top 16, something like that. Just narrowly outside the cut with pretty straightforward, with the exception of it's almost like this person, Jason Florent, went to the Michael J. school of, even though I'm Teamer Adventures, I'm still going to play a Nissa Who Shakes the World and a Cultivate.
Yep.
To remember where I came from.
Just from sometimes. When I look at a deck like this, I'm like, is the Cultivate, it's 27 land deck, is the Cultivate so much better than 1 Uro? That's the question I have. You only have 1. Is it so much better than 1 Uro? And I don't know. I don't. For the purpose that we're trying to get to, which is either Nissa or Escapes of the Wilds, I'm really not sure. What do you think?
I don't know. I think the Uro seems better to me.
1, if it's only 1, right? I think I'd rather.
Doesn't matter how many. I think I would rather. I guess I would rather have a Cultivate than a 4th Uro in this deck. But you're not even close to wanting 4 Uros.
No, but there's only 1 slot for it, right? So I think
then I would play Uro. I would play Uro.
What do you think about this sideboard, which is 15 one-ofs?
I mean, you're talking my language. It's Fae of Wishes sideboard, so there's at least purpose to it, you know? Like, when you have Fae of Wishes, you do get a good multiplier on stuff you can go get. And in fact, with no creatures in the sideboard, every single one of these is a target.
When I play this deck, I kind of play a lot of Aether Gusts, Negates, and Disdainful Stroke, which I believe is a card that is missing from this sideboard. So I think you get a lot of value from just siding some of them in. Because if you look at the matchups, some people are just not impressed by your 2-for-1s off of the Lucky Clover, right? Like, the decks that go way over the top don't care that you did 2 extra damage to them on turn of 3. That's not scary to them. So you need to have something to stop them from their over the top spell. And when all of your permissions in the sideboard, and you only have 3 total, you do, I think, want some kind of Disdainful Strokes or additional Aether Gusts that some are in your deck, some are in your sideboard. How often do you ever go for the card Unsummon? Unsummon sucks as a sideboard card / target for Fae of Wishes, in my opinion. It's just not. It's not that good.
You don't think you're gonna unsummon some people sometimes? And that unsummon? I don't know. What do you got? I guess you unsummon Uro.
I mean, how often do you unsummon someone that you can't Aether Gust or Red Cap melee them? or for that matter,
I mean, it costs
Gomery's
one.
ambush them, right? Like there's
Well,
there are
that
a
part of
lot
that. No,
other
no, no. Hold
options.
on. That's a real thing. Part of the reason for all this is that you do sideboard some in. It's not like you're not sideboarding. You just sideboard in some of the options, and you keep in the sideboard some of the options, and it depends on the matchup.
I'm not a big fan of Cage. I'm not a big fan of
I'm not a Cage guy.
like not in this deck, right? Like so I just
Well, that's why you don't play the Euro.
well, there you go. But I am a fan of like redundancy on kind of like the blue permission-ish angle. The cards I really like everybody likes Storm's Wrath, right? Like the only way that you can compete with this deck in some decks is by going very wide because there's just so much natural card advantage to it. So you can just murder them with a well-placed Storm's Wrath. And when you 2-for-1 somebody with the Fae of Wishes and you're like Storm's Wrath and Once and Future, I mean, it just pack it in. Nobody comes back from that.
So I do got to give it to you though. Even though Teamer Adventures didn't crack the top 5, if you look outside the top 5, first of all, the number of Teamer Adventure decks that were 1 or 2 wins out, it was like crazy high. So there were five decks that were 1 win out, and of them, it was Temur Sultai Ramp, yeah. A Simic Aggro, which that's an outlier, but then a Teamer Adventure deck, and actually 2 different Teamer Adventure decks, and then the rest. Like if you just look, there's so many Teamer Adventure and Teamer Elemental decks, and even though they are different engines, they share some DNA conceptually.
Yeah, I think that we should talk a lot about Teamer. The other Teamer deck, Teamer Elementals. Yeah, I think.
Well, there's a third. There's also some Teamer Ramp people, right?
Yeah, but I think
in the top 8, Teamer Flash.
I appreciate what you're trying to say here, but the bet was Teamer's number 1 or Black is number 1.
You definitely lost the bet.
Did not win.
I definitely did not lose the bet. What I mean is that there's something to be gleaned about 4 different Teamer archetypes doing really well, and if you look at the top 32. There's actually more Teamer than Sultai.
Yeah, across
that's interesting,
archetypes. Right? Just looking at that top 8 Teamer Flash deck, the first impulse that I have when you're like, hey, there's 3, if not 4 different Teamer archetypes that are performing despite the banning of Wilderness Reclamation, my first impulse is to say, yeah, because the best card is Uro. And like half these decks don't play any Uro. Like the Teamer Flash deck is a creature deck, has no Uro. Right?
It looks like one of those classic Simic Flash decks, with Brazen Borrower, Frilled Mystic, Nightpack Ambusher, a bunch of counterspells and bounce, but you're like, what's the red for? Oh, a couple of Flame Sweeps and Bone Crusher Giants.
I'm not super sold on the red splash here. I think that you're paying.
There are Uros in the sideboard, though. That's at least something.
You're paying a lot in Stomping Grounds and Steam Vents.
I think you're paying a lot. I don't think so. I think that's part of the reason why you're priced into playing either red or black, is because you're already going to have to play the Tri-Land. And once you're going to play 4 Fable, if you're going to play Fable Passage and a Tri-Land, you're so far of the way into playing a third color already.
I am a huge buyer, as you know, of Simic-based Flash decks. I won a PTQ with Simic Flash just a few months ago. That said, I don't know. I just don't know about the third color. Like, I think Flame Sweep is a very, very medium card, especially when you're playing cards like Nightpack Ambusher, which is so good against people going wide already. Right, like you just don't need this. Like, they might have some 1/1s because that's not what beats you. Right, the things that beat you are maybe. I guess it's great against Knights. I guess Knights can go straight through this deck, but like, I'd rather just literally just play the card Lovestruck Beast in my sideboard than a lot of these cards and just play some 5/5s and soak up some damage with 1/1s and not
get back to your roots.
I really think. You're right. Ketria Triome is a very good card, but Stomping Ground and Steam Vents is a steep investment for a deck that doesn't go over the top. Like, this deck is I'm at 75th percentile power level. The reason that I'm good is because of all the tempo that I steal from you, but it has all these concessions that are like anti-tempo concessions, like playing Bone Crusher Giant on its main phase. That wasn't a thing in the Simic decks, but that might just be your guy, right? So I don't know. I'm not all there, and I like Flash. That's the other thing I want to stress. I really like Flash. I'm really not sold on 3.
Yeah. I mean, I'm not sold on a Flash archetype anyway. I know you're big into Flash generally anyway, but I think if you're going to play Teamer, the way I like Teamer is like Bravolus's 6-win deck from the Red Bull.
The Elementals?
Teamer Elementals. 80-card Yorion Teamer Elementals. Dude, why don't... You know what?
1 million
one of these days, I want somebody to show up with like an 82-card Yorion deck, man.
So I'm gonna dissent a little bit because I do think this is a way you can do it, and I think for me, I'm a big buyer on Elementals. But what I'd like to do rather than talk about this deck is to jump over to the Standard League that was published, I think, today, and look at Willie Edel's deck, right? With 5-0 deck that Willie Edel played. And the reason that I think it's worth talking about, despite the fact that some of this stuff is head scratchers, is because Edel's deck has Terror of the Peaks, right? Yep. And the deck from the Red Bull Challenge that Bravolis played doesn't have Terror of the Peaks. And
I like Terror of the Peaks in this deck.
Yeah, Terror of the Peaks Genesis Ultimatum is fundamentally different from not Terror of the Peaks Genesis Ultimatum, right? So the thing is, you just cast Terror of the Peaks and then, like, whatever, flashback your Uro or cast an Omnath. You are doing it already. But if you Genesis Ultimatum, you can sometimes flip over 2 Terror of the Peaks. I mean, people are destroyed by that. That's just dead.
Plus, Terror of the Peaks is just a really strong Magic the Gathering card.
Absolutely. So here's the thing that's crazy to me. How is Edel playing two copies of Risen Reef?
Because he's just not playing that many Elementals in his Elemental deck.
But he doesn't have like a Cultivate or something to get to 5. Like,
yeah, he does. Llanowar Visionary.
I'm just saying, like, but it's not a Cultivate.
And Uro, of course.
Yeah, of course he has Uro, right? Those cards are a very good combination with Jolraelm on Fully Recluse, which is an awesome innovation for this deck. I'm just saying, I want to get to Cavalier of Thorns with a high level of certainty on turn, could be turn 3 in this deck because of Arboreal Grazer. And Cavalier of Thorns combo with Risen Reef is so good anyway. I just think just 2 Risen Reefs, that's a head scratcher for me. But I think otherwise this deck
it just doesn't have that many Elementals. I don't know. It's probably just too good of a card not to, but like, what are you wanting to cut for it?
I'm not sure. I mean, if I say Ugin, not Uro. If I say Ugin, am I crazy?
Yeah. No, you need Ugin. You need Ugin.
7 casts to cost Ugin and 4 other cards. It's a little too good.
Well, no, I mean, so Ugin costs 8, of course, but like, you got to be able to go over the top. Like, this deck can like start putting out just a huge amount of permanents, and just like you got to be able to solve some problems, and Ugin actually can solve problems. And it also gives you a way to be able to present a threat that doesn't just get swept off the board.
So, Patrick, of course, I know Ugin costs 8, but you can get it for 7, right? Like, isn't that how the Genesis
Ultimatum right. So if you just Genesis Ultimatum into the Ugin, you're obviously just doing it unreal.
Doing it so much. This is such a good deck, I think, in terms of its power level. I'm just not sure if the 60-card version is better than the 80-card version. It looks really good to me.
So the big thing, like this, one other thing about Edel's list is that he gets to do the Jolrael into Llanowar Visionary interaction a little bit more often. One of the reasons that this list is a little down on Risen Reef is it doesn't give you the same Jolrael into value play that Uro and Visionary do.
Yep, that's true.
Whereas, like, if you're going to play the 80-card version, although, you know what? I don't know. At the end of the day, even if you play the 80-card version, it's not like you're even playing more Elementals as it lie, because it's like, we see extra Bone Crusher Giants and Paradise Druids. All right, I'm off it. Forget your, Friendship with Yorion ended. Terror of the Peaks is my new best friend.
Right. Terror of the Peaks is unreal in this strategy. I just wanted to point this out. I think that Edel's 60 card version has more impact because of the presence of Terror of the Peaks than Bravolis' 80 card version, which is kind of counterintuitive. One of the things that's super powerful about this deck, though, is you point out that this deck has got Uro as well as Llanowar Visionary, which allows it to jump 3 to 5. That's so good in this deck because of Elder Gargaroth in the sideboard. I mean, like, absolutely bonzer, 3-5 sideboard jump against, any beatdown deck. Elder Gargaroth is pretty medium against decks that are mid-range, right? Like, they could just kill it oftentimes. You really need to get that attack in for it to be benefiting. And I just don't think that a deck like Sultai is that impressed by even one attack from Elder Gargaroth.
So what did you think of, it's back over in the Red Bull, but Pierre Violu, I apologize on the name, but 7-win deck, a Simic ramp deck with Questing Beast and Elder Gargaroth, giving it a little bit more aggro of a vibe, and Brazen Borrower. But it's basically mono green with Wolf Willow Haven picking up the slack of Growth Spiral. But then its blue is just splashing blue for Brazen Borrower and Hydroid Crassus. And the part that has me scratching my head, where are the Uros?
I didn't even notice that this deck didn't have any Uros because it's so intuitive in an Arboreal Grazer deck to play Uro.
Right. Like, it's got 4 Cultivate, 3 Wolf Willow Haven.
And 4 Nissa.
4 Paradise Druid. But you don't just wake up one day and just not play Uro in a deck like this.
I think Uro has got to be better than Wolf Willow Haven in this deck, if for no other reason that this is an Ugin deck. Right? Like, it's not that, your turn 2 play is so important once you're going off with Ugin, but, like, it's a little thing there, I think, that matters. To answer your previous question, I really like the direction that this deck is going in. The one thing that I would do differently, I think, is to play as many as 4 Disdainful Strokes in the main deck. I really like the fact that Pierre played Disdainful Stroke in the sideboard. I think Disdainful Stroke might be the most underplayed card in Standard right now, just because if you assume that Simic is if Sultai is the top deck, which it really seems like it is, that's a permanent answer to, like, Casualties of War, Extinction Event, like, so many of the cards that they use to dominate matchups. Just like thing, you leave up 2 mana, and you probably end up killing them with your Questing Beast next attack. I also think this deck is too heavy on Elder Gargaroth. Elder Gargaroth is a very good card. I think that it's a bit off-theme. Like, that is just, like, you've made the argument before, it's just like a Baneslayer, but it doesn't have haste, right? It doesn't generate any card advantage unless you have it going, and while it's good, I don't think that, like, I would rather have it than even a 4th Questing Beast or additional Brazen Borrowers, like cards that allow me to take advantage of the interplay that is afforded by the fact that I have both mana acceleration and very powerful cards while still attacking, right? Like, mono green, good at attacking, doesn't have a lot of mana acceleration, doesn't have as many powerful cards. This deck does a bunch of things at the same time, but doesn't take advantage of all of them at the same time. It certainly does over the course of 75, but I think, like, I would shift, like, at least 2 Gargaroths to the sideboard, shift as many as 4 Disdainful Strokes in the main deck, and certainly consider playing Uro. Also, shout out to Shifting Ceratops. That card is bonzer in this deck.
Well, awesome, man. Sultai did seem to kind of crush the tippity top. I really think that Temur is going to end up shifting the landscape a little bit.
Temur Elementals?
Temur in general. I think there's so many different versions. We're going to see how much Temur Adventure versus Elemental ends up being the way to go. But got to bounce to David. See you next week, dude.
Bye-bye.
Life didn't work so great. Tried to play Dredge for jail or hate. Ghostly prison waiting for my untapped phase. Your Gora trapped in amber stasis state. Lost a lot of friends, got left behind. Had to find a way not to lose my mind. Trapped in a vault with nothing but time. Parents and my friends were the key to find. Magic gave me purpose and drive. The game, the better weather light inside. Chase through the mirage, gotta survive.